Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. My name is Deacon Walcott, and I'm so happy that you have tuned in once again over Trinity TV, over the internet, over the cable providers, and so on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Well, you know, the shepherd is in Rome. You know, normally when he's in Barbados, we could kind of tune into him, but I think he's like 6 hours ahead of us, so he might be sleeping. But I have with us today on Shepherd's Corner two wonderful people, and we're going to be dealing with the topic of marriage as a covenant. And this is kind of like a follow-up or a step again in that same direction that where we started last week. So to my right, I have Leela Ramdeen. She's a lawyer. She is also a lay assessor on the Equal Opportunity Tribunal. She's also the Episcopal Delegate for Social Justice in the Archdiocese of Port of Spain. Welcome, Leela.
Thank you.
Great.
Good to be here.
Yeah, well, we've been on a number of shows together.
Yes, Eric.
Right?
Yes.
And right next to her is Father Matthew Ragbir. He's a graduate of the John Paul II Institute for Studies on Marriage and Family in Rome. He's also the spiritual director and theological director for the Archdiocese on the Family Life Commission. And then he lectures on sexual ethics at the seminary. Welcome, Father Matthew.
Thank you.
I heard you just came back from Rome.
Well, I just came back from Jerusalem.
You didn't pass through Rome?
No, I passed through London.
How was the Holy Land?
Beautiful, very powerful experience. But, you know, quite, as you know in the news right now, you know, the realities of separation exist. We stayed actually at a convent in the West Bank where out of my window I could see the wall of separation, you know, and we said mass on the rooftop overlooking. So it was a powerful experience of praying for God to bring unity in the midst of so much apparent and clear division, you know. So, but it was a very powerful experience.
And it was peaceful, no incidents.
Yes, no incidents.
All right, well, you know, in Trinidad, we've been having some incidents.
Yes,
so we're going to be dealing with some of those things.
Yes.
Today, the topic is on marriage as a covenant.
Yeah.
And I want to open with the statement coming out of the AEC bishops, where they defined marriage as a covenant between a man and a woman for the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of children. And their statement says, we will always oppose using the word marriage to define any other form of union. Let's use that to kick this off. And somebody wrote in and they say, given the church's position on the decriminalization of buggery, does it mean that the church will endorse same-sex marriage? Who wants to kick off with that question?
Well, I remember when now Bishop Lianos, he was Monsignor Lianos, when we were part of the discussion on the gender policy, and the whole issue of homosexuality was being discussed. And some people in the group were saying, don't be worried, you know, we don't want same-sex marriage. We just want the right to be recognized, to get rid of, decriminalize the buggery law, and that's it. But if we look around the world, we see the trend. The trend has been first to decriminalize the buggery law, and the church rightly says, in my view, that we should not, my litmus test is, what would Jesus do? Yeah. Would he want to lock up people for 25 years? So Archbishop's previous article on thinking with the church was right. We really, the church to the UN, the representative to the UN rightly said in the 63rd session that all states should be encouraged to decriminalize homosexuality. It is a big gap between decriminalizing sexuality, homosexuality, and actually moving towards same-sex marriage. Our church, as Archbishop Harris, Emeritus Harris had said, we would always oppose same-sex marriage. We'd fight to the end to maintain marriage between man and woman, because that's what our faith tells us.
Yes.
Yeah?
And more than faith, you know, it's so that we can argue this in many theological reasons. For instance, you know, what God has created and the scriptures, the Christ and the church, that man and woman is an example, and their strength comes from that. But what is important is to move beyond the theological and to face some of the real sociological realities and the realities of natural law that are clear in it. So for instance, it is only within a marriage, a monogamous marriage of man and woman, that you find, first of all, the social capital. You know, we speak about social capital that's being generated. And what is the social capital? It means that as they bring their love into one and the fidelity, you create a kind of, you know what we use capital for, you know, to expand, to buy things. You create a social capital that brings cohesion to the society. Because in their bonds and in having children and in procreation, they create bonds and, you know, linkages, intergenerational linkages that bring the fabric of society together and bring cohesion. That's beyond theology, you know. There is a very natural and sociological importance that the church is pointing out there, that we must understand the stability it brings, the trust, the ability to grow as a society. It all depends upon this, and therefore what we have is a relational common good. You know, it's a common good that must be secured, and we have to ask ourselves, what is the role of democracy? What is the role of governments, of legislatures, if not for the common good? You know, and protecting and upholding the social fabric and the common good that is there. That's part of the teaching of the church, and the church points that out.
But you have the you know, many factions saying that the fear is that once you allow for the removal of the Buggery law, you then open up a can of worms. You then give somebody, you give the side that wants gay marriage and so on, and the rights to gay marriage, a foot inside. You know, now Archbishop Jason says, I believe with the church that marriage is the load-bearing wall of civilization. So when we allow, if the fears of a lot of our brothers and sisters within the faith and also outside of the faith, what they are seeing is that chink in the armor. You know, how do we relate to that then?
Well, he's rightly continuing to say that if we legalize same-sex union and call them marriage, that will damage the institution of marriage and change fundamentally the meaning of the word. And that's why Catholics will stand with other faith communities that want to preserve marriage. Now, one of the things the judge said, Justice Ramprasad, is that he challenged the state when the state said that they wanted to retain the Buggery law to make sure that the values of society are maintained. And he said, well, family values. He said, well, what family values? Because the norm nowadays is single-parent family. So it's interesting the judge used that. Now, we accept as Catholics that we do not live in societies in our world today where marriage is valued by everyone. But God calls us to set a standard. We have, as His Grace rightly said, we do not pander to the trends of the time, but to the eternal laws of God. And so while we may have a lot of single parents, while we may have in other countries, England, UK and Ireland and US have same-sex marriage and other places. While that may exist, we have to have certain standards according to the law of God that we will strive towards. And that's why his article on marriage, the covenant, is so important. What is it that we stand for? You know, as they say, if you stand for everything, if you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for everything.
Okay, no, I'm glad that you said that. If you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for everything. But if these older societies, right, like Ireland, you mentioned, like England, you mentioned, like United States that you mentioned, fell, will Trinidad fall too? Don't we run that risk?
We certainly do. You know, we certainly do run that risk.
He actually accepts that, doesn't he? He said that in Thinking with the Church, where he said that is another issue that he said it's a matter. I know a major objection is that repealing the buggery laws will open the door to same-sex marriage. These may be strategies that are tied together. We need to deal with them separately. We will oppose same-sex marriage in every way possible, and that's a different issue. So we're not ostriches putting our heads in the sand and ignoring the fact that that may come. But we cannot say because that may come, we will continue with the discrimination of our catechism. Make it clear that we should not discriminate. We should not. Anyone. In fact, yes. In fact, he says that Archbishop Jason that nothing. We must not hate speech, discriminating attitudes or prejudices is not becoming of a disciple of Christ. And those words reminded me of what our own president, Paula May Weeks, warned on the 17th, Tuesday the 17th of April, when she said we have to be careful not to damage the national psyche by inadvertently inciting victimization, bigotry, and violence. Because we know, it's interesting that today's, the paper dated Thursday 19th of April, quotes two people from the LGBTI community saying that you remember after the incident, a woman called Sharice Barkley was spat on, cursed on the steps of the High Court. And a few people lost their jobs and were evicted from their homes. But she said, when the Archbishop said two lines, the parent, one child who was thrown out of the home, from Archbishop Jason's words, he was taken back. And another person says, Paula Lindo, because what the Archbishop said, because of what he said, people now have a more reasonable view. So they're rightly saying it shows how religious leaders carry such weight with what they say. And that's important. Yes, we will stand up for the rights of people not to be discriminated, not to be spat on or whatever. That's not human dignity. One of the things we have to recognize, I carry the load for social justice in our church in terms of saying what our church teaches. The fundamental principle, social justice principle, is the sanctity of life and the dignity of the human person. And that dignity comes not because I'm fat or thin, I'm from Beetham or Westmore. It's an inherent dignity that has been given by God. And it's that dignity that our Archbishop and our church is telling us to recognize in our brothers and sisters from the LGBTI community, isn't it?
Yeah. Part of the challenge in all of this is the way in which we construct the argument.
Yes.
You know, that is something we have not looked at. So for instance, as long as the argument is constructed in terms of a victimization and a civil rights issue, we'll find ourselves in a hole in which we are in. But when we step out into the broader understanding, that's why I started with a sociological, natural law understanding of marriage. Because when you step out of that into, well, what exactly is marriage? And is marriage itself a social construct? And the answer from what the church and the tradition and a very philosophical answer is no, it's not. You know, a natural marriage happens between a man and a woman. It's a relational common good that strengthens society. You could call same-sex unions whatever you want to call it, but it's not marriage in its understanding, in its true sense of what it is. Otherwise, we get into a word game, victimization, comparing it to racial prejudice, comparing it to all sorts of things. And, you know, so it is really to look at where are we coming from with the argument, you know, and are we understanding what marriage really is, and what it offers us.
Yeah, His Grace rightly said, the human in marriage a covenant. The human did not make the institution of marriage. We cannot simply change it. That's a profound statement. He ends his article with that. You know, we can't change it because it came from God.
And it flows from human nature itself.
Yes.
You know, it comes from who we are. You know?
So, Father Matthew, I mean, you teach on sexual ethics at the seminary. I mean, this goes to the heart of sexual ethics.
Yes, because, you see, beyond that, it goes to an understanding. See, ethics is a discussion about the goods that are involved in everything, you know. But beyond that, we have to come to the understanding of who is a human person. That is the real question. And the dignity of the human person that Leela has rightly spoken about. But in understanding that, we have to understand, first of all, how does John Paul II said, the future of humanity passes through the family.
Yeah.
How do we understand the human person in that role? Another thing that he spoke about, is, well, not him, but Rosica, who writes about him, says, the foundation of family is the marriage. And the vocation to marriage is written in the very nature of man and woman. The family is the most favorable environment in which children can be born and raised. Without married people, we cannot build the future of society.
Say that again. I would like you to restate that, because that is fundamental and very important.
The foundation of the family is marriage. The vocation of, and just to add in there, whether or not we have all families being single-parent family because of the brokenness and messiness of our society or not. So, and just responding to what the judge had said, you don't make a law based on a broken reality.
Right.
Sure, that may be so, but there are many families who are struggling to keep their marriages intact. And what we should be doing is, how can we help families? Yeah. How can we care for marriages in ways to strengthen it and strengthen the social fabric of our society? That will then help our society to grow and develop and care for all the moral ills that we face in our society that we know begin at home.
Good.
So we can't make an excuse that says we look at this and therefore, it's logically flawed. There's a German sociologist, Gabriel Kubi, who says, as sex goes, so goes the family. As family goes, so goes society. Sexual norms have a decisive influence on the whole cultural edifice. You take it away, you're going to erode the whole of society and civilization.
And aren't we seeing that today?
Yes, yes.
Because of moral relativism.
Yes.
I think we have to refer to the concept of moral relativism, which is so damaging to our societies around the world. And the concept of moral relativism tells people, if it feels good, you do it. Just do it, whatever you want. There's no objective moral norm. And as Catholics, we believe that there are objective moral norms that should underpin the way in which we live our lives.
And there are two things there, So, and Pope Francis names it in Amoris Laetitia. There is the utilitarian thinking.
Yeah.
So the utilitarian thinking says, if it suits me, do it. Okay? And then there's what is called an emotive thinking. So emotivism that says, if it feels good, do it. So when we bring these two together, in a postmodern world in which we live, with a certain kind of neo-Marxist leftist view, not to be overly philosophical, but that's what it is. Then what we have before us is a utilitarian emotivism that says, if it suits me, I'm doing it, and if it feels good, I'm doing it.
Right.
And it's from top down. It's in all of our lives because it's part of the air we breathe.
So
but
just
we have to be able to sort through and recognize, but this is not what is leading me to flourish.
Yeah.
This means that the point of truth has no bearing, and therefore, which in itself falls flat on its face. Because for us to develop, it means that we're moving towards something, which means in us there's this inclination, this sense deep within us that there is a truth to which we are moving and developing.
But
the argument.
Yeah. Can I just interrupt to get my train of thought so I don't lose it?
So you don't lose it. Go ahead.
So that if we don't address the issue of moral relativism, what that has led to is selfishness, individualism, greed, corruption. These spawned from moral relativism.
And everybody grabbing for their own piece of the pie.
Individualism,
and saying,
never mind my neighbor. Who is my neighbor? It doesn't matter. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, because, so therefore the argument, so therefore what do we do to tell our brothers and sisters who struggle with their sexuality?
Well, the truth is that we are worlds away from where we need to be in terms of effective development. What do I mean by effective development? I mean the kind of development we have from the time a child is born and all through life that we journey with that helps them to grow into, the Archbishop used the words, I think he says fulfillment, but into the, people popularly write, the best version of yourself, or into, you know, to use a psychological term, individuation, which means a kind of flourishing. So how do we help people come to flourish in terms of their sexuality, where you have healthy relationships, where you understand what it means to give and receive? You know, how can we do that in a society where from this high we're teaching people you can't trust each other? You know, just grab what is yours. The openness, you know, there are arguments within philosophy and in sociology about the way in which, in homosexuality, you know, Jacques Lacan is a Freudian, as a disciple of Freud, and I was taught in Rome by one of his students. And one of the things that he points out is that there is no openness to the other in a same-sex union.
There is no openness to the other
in a same-sex union. Now, I'm going to bring in a bit of Christian theology here, because it's important for us to recognize this, that when God invites Israel into a monogamous relationship and says, I will be your God, you will be my people, he was modeling for them a marriage. And that's why Hosea speaks about a marriage. But it's a marriage where it's not same and same. It's a marriage where there's difference. And in that difference, life comes forth. And when Christ does the same for Christ and the church, and St. Paul writes in Romans 5 so beautifully about the marriage of husband and wives, and then he says, this is a great mystery, I mean Christ and the church. It is reminding us that, yes, there is a necessary complementarity that's being eroded in this kind of relativism. What is being struck at is a fundamental complementarity of the male-female polarity within, which is called the humanum, you know. That complementarity is just being cut away. And Pope Francis says it is an ecological and anthropological crisis. Ecological because he says, how are we caring for the environment that we grow in if we are eroding that which is so natural to us? We are caring for so many things in the environment, or not, but we are not caring for the human person that comes in this male-female polarity.
Yeah, can I just, you asked the question, how can we then help the homosexual community? I think that's what you were referring to. I think we have to again go back to what our catechism tells us. Section, for viewers, section 2357, 2358 and 2359 in our catechism, you can Google it, are the areas that talk about chastity and homosexuality in our catechism. And what our church is telling people, the church recognizes that there will be a number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies, and that this number is not negligible. But while the church has no discrimination, etc., homosexual persons are called to chastity. And if we call in people to chastity, if we have to create environments and organizations that will help them. Internationally, as you know, we have Courage. The people in Courage have been to Trinidad and Tobago years ago to help our own, the Vatican letter to the bishops of the Catholic Church on the pastoral care of homosexual persons, 1986 document by Pope Benedict XVI. Quite clearly, we need, as this latest writer last week, Christopher Hale says, we need a new pastoral paradigm in the church, particularly for people who are, there are many people in our church at all levels, Catholics. So this is not only homosexuality, it's not outside the church, in the church as well. So we need a new paradigm of pastoral care for people. As Pope Francis said on his way back from Rio on the flight in 2013, he said, if a person is gay and seeks the Lord and is willing, who am I to judge that person? He said he was paraphrasing by heart the catechism of the church, where it says that they should be treated with, he says, delicacy and not marginalized. So what His Grace wanted us to focus on tonight is the fact that the name, remember the first book that Pope Francis wrote was The Name of God is Mercy. The name of God is mercy. And he said, mercy is God's ID card, is the primary characteristic of God. And we, the faithful, our duty, our role is to dispense this mercy. not to put down people. He actually goes down and said, the church does not exist to condemn people, this is Pope Francis, but to bring about an encounter with the visceral love of God's mercy. So, you know, if there are no situations, he said, we cannot get out of, we are not condemned to sink into quicksand. Mercy is the first attribute of God. God doesn't want anybody to be lost. His mercy is infinitely greater than our sins. Nothing in the church, he says, in the church's preaching or witness can be lacking in mercy. So in all of this discussion, let's remember, as His Grace wants us to do, that our God is a merciful God. And we have to find way forward.
And
what then is the church doing? Let's look at it from a pastor's perspective.
Sure.
What are we doing? Are we reaching out in our parishes? Are we reaching out in our communities to our brothers and sisters who are struggling?
So there's so much more we need to do. And it begins with the internal conversion. You see, part of what I think the issue is when you point upon one group of people and you label them, which is a very dangerous thing, you know, at so many levels, psychologically, etc., and for their own development. And then you say, how are we to help them develop? Then you miss the point that how are we to help every single person develop in their sexuality? Because it is not about them. It's about a sexual wound in our society, an affective wound, and that's why I use that word. Given that, what Pope Francis, you know, so he speaks about mercy, and then he writes this beautiful post-synodal apostolic exhortation on the joy of love. Okay? Now, I had the pleasure of being in Rome and working in the synod on the family, and in there, what does he say? He speaks about accompaniment. Now, we are miles away from accompaniment. We are miles away from even learning how not to judge people. And I'm not talking about, you don't even have to start with people who, they may not even be homosexual. They may be effeminate, and people already label them. And not everybody who's effeminate is homosexual either. But just think about the way in which, as a society, we judge. Okay? And then, so how do we tackle that? And how do we as Christians keep ourselves accountable for that? And then how do we journey and walk with people towards what Christ is asking? Now, all those things mean that we have to begin creating pastoral plans and training people to do those things. Pope Francis, in that same trip from Rio in 2013, in addressing the bishops in Rio, one of the things he said in one of his addresses was that we have to devise suitable pastoral plans, I'm almost quoting him word for word, where people can walk into the darkness with others and not become overcome by it. How do we help people walk towards the gospel of Christ? Not that the law of Christ is changing, but what it is that there is, as John Paul said, the law of gradualness. The law doesn't come down. We walk with each other towards where God desires us to be. It will take a lifetime and more, you know.
Well, I mean, this thing has been around for a lifetime. Good evening, everybody. I know that you're looking on. You may have a number of questions that you'd like to ask the team. We're opening up the phone lines. We're opening up. I've been getting WhatsApp messages already. So we would like to invite you to please call in or send your WhatsApp messages, or you can actually talk to us on Facebook. You know, send your messages on our Facebook page at Living Water Community. So please, we would like to get your comments on what we're talking about, and maybe to answer some of the questions that you may have, especially if you're struggling and trying to balance the two. You know, God's mercy, you know, and how do we, you know, I guess overcome our fear of what's happening right now. You may have relatives struggling with their own sexuality, you know, and you're struggling even to deal with those relationships, you know. So I'm inviting you all to call in. Come, get in touch with us. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation.
Yes, you see, that's the sad thing, that in the past, it was taboo to talk about it. I know many families where, in fact, the concept, the glossary now is LGBTQIA, it's expanded.
Yeah.
And when you look at the meaning of some of these words, it's not only homosexuality.
Sure.
And so it's expanding, and we have to understand we need that conversation. We need to bring it out in the open. As the Pope said, you were referring to it, he said on the way from Rio, we need to enter the darkness, the night in which so many of our brothers and sisters live. We need to be able to make contact with them, let them feel our closeness without letting ourselves be wrapped up in that darkness and influenced by it. So we have to go out there. Outreach work is important. Reach out, listen. We're not listening to what some of these, I've been involved in families where their sons and daughters are struggling with their sexuality. How many of our parishes have ministry to minister to our brothers and sisters who are in that situation?
Well, I know that some parishes are even struggling. They say, well, the minute we open up a ministry to that, people are going to see people coming and immediately label them.
Yeah.
So that is it. How do you then?
It shows an immaturity. It's a great.
But we need to start the conversation.
You have to start somewhere.
Yes.
And please God, eventually, I know in the Family Life Commission, we are investigating the possibility of doing something with courage once more.
Yeah.
Doing something. We have got a call. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. Thank you for calling.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, Deacon. Good evening, Father. Good evening, Mr. Ramdeen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Good, thank you.
All right. I'm enjoying the program so far. I just have a couple comments I want to make.
Sure.
Mr. Ramdeen alluded to mercy, the need for mercy.
Yes.
Now, mercy is also discouraging sin. Because as Jesus admonished he admonished the adulterous woman, go and sin no more.
Yes.
He didn't have to condemn her. She was condemned already, well, condemned in inverted commas. But he told her, go and sin no more. Now, how are we being merciful if we are encouraging the decriminalization of a law that is going to promote immorality, especially among our homosexual brothers and sisters? And we are I think we are sort of burying our heads in the sand, because this is ultimately going to lead to same-sex marriage. We know that it's happened in 26 countries, and Trinidad is going to be no exception if the law is decriminalized. Are we going to make what is wrong lawful? As Catholics, we should be discouraging such a law and pastoring. Have a pastoral plan to rehabilitate homosexuals. Thank you.
Yeah, just to refer again to what His Grace had said last week, that at the 63rd session of the UN in December the 18th, 2008, the Church put forward its official teaching. So we need to remember this is the official teaching of our Church. And I quote, the Holy See continues to advocate that every sign of unjust discrimination towards homosexual persons should be avoided, and the Holy See urges states to do away with criminal penalties against them. As a Catholic, I always say to people, my litmus test is, what would Jesus do? Would he want us to lock up homosexuals for 25 years, which is what our law says? The Sexual Offences Act, sections 13 and 16 that Mr. Jason Jones is seeking to have removed from our statute, says that it's either 25 years or 5 years for serious indecency. And His Grace rightly said, 25 years, I think it's in this week, Catholic News, he says in marriage and a contract, 25 years is not, does Jesus really want us to lock up people for 25 years? So in terms of the law itself, he says we have to distinguish between that, dealing with people unjustly, and same-sex marriage. They're two separate things, and he rightly said, let's deal with them separately. Yeah. So I understand from John 8, 1 to 8, the woman caught in adultery. He said, go and sin no more. But our church, in our catechism, the church has always made a distinction between sexual orientation, which is not a sin. So we can't condemn people if they have that orientation. That's morally indifferent. And the church distinguishes between that and sexual action, the action, taking an act and actually, having intercourse with somebody of the same sex or whatever. That is immoral in the church, a disordered act.
Well, there are many things. There are many things here. But because you brought it up, I have to say something on it. The church actually says that the inclination itself is disordered.
Yes, is disordered, yes.
But one of the things we have to be careful of is, as you're rightly saying, mercy and truth coming together. And part of truth is also understanding, is it right for us to penalize someone for that? And who says that is a greater sin than? Which is one of the points the Archbishop is pointing out. When it comes to that, and therefore you're getting at legality and morality. What he was speaking about last week. I was not here, but I heard about it. And therefore we have to ask ourselves, and we have to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of everybody just hitting upon this one thing, because there are many in terms of the sexual sins. There's a whole range of them, and it's really about recovering morality. Now, the other thing is this: that a mature people lives morally, whether or not you have a law. Okay, a people who have a good effective formation and systems in place, and we don't, and that's why laws are there, yes, to protect us and everything else. But you cannot jail somebody for 25 years. And as you see in the 1553, I think it was one, removing all their assets and everything, then do it for everything else.
Exactly.
That's what he was saying, because in there was also adultery, it was also divorce, it was also everything else.
We do have a call. We do have a call, and I'd like to take this call. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. Hello?
What's going on?
Maybe we lost the call. But you wanted to continue on that, and that was one of the things that we were speaking about. Because, there isn't a different hell for somebody who doesn't repent adultery than there is for somebody who has committed a homosexual act. You're going to both go to hell. We do have a call. Good evening. Good evening.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. I'd just like to say the homosexual people, they must understand that two females cannot produce a child, two males cannot produce a child. So if they chose that lifestyle, I hope that they will never ever be able to adopt a child, whether it's a little boy or a little girl. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Sure, and thank you, because what we are speaking about is that we will oppose same-sex marriage, because the essence of marriage is not that. And one of the things we don't understand deeply enough is the whole understanding of natural law, and what that means. But that's a whole other conversation. But yes, our brother is right.
Yeah, that's
what is it? What do the psychologists say? If you, and I'm asking you this question: what do the psychologists say for a child growing up with two, let's say, same-sex parents? But we'll hold on that. I'll ask you that question a little later. We have a call. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner.
Hello, yes?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Hello?
Yes. Hi.
You hearing me, right?
Yes.
Okay. I want to draw your attention to something. All right, good night to the panel.
Good night.
Okay. I want to draw your attention to something. Many years ago, there was a certain lawyer, he was Attorney General. He had executed a certain amount of people. Good? And then thereafter, he went and joined United Nations and where they're talking about human rights.
Yes.
And then thereafter, we had stopped the execution of human beings.
Yes.
Right? Now, you see what is happening today. When these people do whatever wrong they have committed, there's no penalty at all. And then you have people remaining inside of the system in the prison, right, under the state, or the pressure of the state. They are being attended to. There are a lot of people out here that would take pleasure in doing what they are doing and go inside of there and spend time. And sometimes they have laws that were 5 years after that they can, you know, go to Privy Council and things like that. Now, we are playing with something here now of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, if you can continue on saying that this law, which is archaic, or however you law people want to put it in, we have to be very careful in a sense that if we don't try to nip the circumstances in its bud right now, we're going to have difficulties. Because remember, we have in the past where the Irish priests and so were being accused wrongfully many times all over the world has been happening. Now, we have to be very careful on this because sometimes parents mind their children, show them affected love and so on. They grow up with the system, and when they go on the outside, they are being encouraged into wrong things. Not only that, no, in Sodom and Gomorrah, these were one of the sins that was committed, right? And there was fire and brimstone on the Sodom and Gomorrah. We have to be careful. We are playing with fire. Now, Revelation show you in the end of time what is going to be happening. There will be all kind of trials that are taking place. And we got to be careful what we are doing. We have to stand up and be strong. This is not only about our faith, Catholic faith. It's about the Muslim people too, the Hindu people. Everybody have to come together. But as it is right now, the indication is the law of the land, because that is where they have been to. Now, as religious body, we have to try and encourage man to female, male to female, and not what they are trying to do, because there's disease that is being spread through the same system, and we got to be careful.
Okay, well, we want to thank you for your contribution, you know, on it, and I would like the panel to answer
I just wanted to refer to a comment he made initially. The church is against the death penalty. You know, he talked about, I think, the death penalty. The church has come out. In fact, our AEC bishops have produced a pastoral letter. Last year they produced it on the gift of human life, which talks about, as the Pope says, there are no circumstances in today's world. It's not appropriate.
Yeah, but did you hear the link that he made? By us, you know, by us not taking life for life, his argument is we are seeing an increase in murders and so on. And I don't think that
I disagree.
No. In fact, that's against the gospel of life.
Yes.
You know, the gospel of life is something else. You know, one of the things that is quite clear in a lot of arguments, besides the relativism, which says I have my truth and you have your truth, that's a problem. But one of the other problems we have is the fear that the inability to make the distinction, the subtle distinctions that exist, so that there's a fear that, as we have been saying, that you truthfully clarify one thing, and then you open a door to everything else. But you know, we have to face that too. That it is possible, as the Archbishop uses the word paradox. It is possible to say, this is what we believe, and this is why, and this is what we believe as a consequence, and this is why. And these two things are held together because we are a people who believe in truth. And you can read and understand why, not just here in the Catechism, and there are many books written on it, and you can reflect deeply. You know, as you say, what would Jesus do in this situation?
We've got another call. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, welcome.
Hi again, Deacon, Father.
Hello.
Mr. Ramdeen. I was the first caller. Thank you for answering any questions. I just have two other points, and then I promise I won't call back, Deacon. The burglary law is punishable by 25 years in prison.
Yeah.
I would like to know when last someone was persecuted or prosecuted rather for this crime. I don't think police or law enforcement people go in to people's houses looking to see if there's anybody committing sodomy. And I haven't heard about anybody being jailed for sodomy. So I believe that the law really exists to preserve morality and to ensure that the same-sex agenda is not pushed. That's one. The other thing is what's going to happen when our children, this is forced upon our children, the gender ideology is forced upon our children, and our homosexual brothers and sisters decide that they want to get married in churches, and they start persecuting those who want religious freedom. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I just refer to the issue about the law itself? This was a law, as the judge rightly said in his 58-page judgment. He said, although he acknowledged claims from the state attorneys that the legislation has never been enforced against consenting adults, he said it did not mitigate the impact on homosexuals who lived in fear of being branded criminals based on the expression of love and affection. Maintaining an unenforced law on the statutes makes no logical sense and seemed to be vindictive rather than protective or curative in manner. It's like holding a big stick, he says, over minority. So, in fact, it's never been enforced. And I think what people need to understand too is that it's not off the statute books yet, because
Correct.
the state is going to appeal, and so they appeal to the Court of Appeal, and if necessary to the Privy Council, which is our highest appellate court. And if in the end the Privy Council agrees with Mr. Jones, then of course it's Parliament that will have to change.
And it's not only people of same-sex orientation.
No,
who
It's heterosexuals who are covered in that in the Sexual Offences Act.
We've got another call. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner.
Hi. Hi, good night to the panel. Are you hearing me?
Good night.
Good night.
Hi, good night, Reverend Derek, Miss Ramdeen, and Father Matthew. Well, it's two, as far as I see, it's two different arguments, really. One about the buggery law, which is a law that exists in our books, and that can be used and abused, who knows, in the future by some, we could have a scenario where a leader, a politician could be gay, and a politician could, at that time, enforce the law at that time for their own agendas, and so many other issues, so many other times that the law could be enforced. Don't mind it wasn't enforced in the past, thank God. I fully agree with the church's position on the issue with buggery, of decriminalizing the law, which is the proper thing to do. Now, of course, there is obviously an agenda, or could be an agenda, for further to further push the, if you may call it, quote unquote, the gay agenda. But my point is, could we as Catholics probably have a pastoral plan where it could work so well that we could be a shining example to the world and reverse this whole, because we tend to think that the tidal wave is coming and we are going to be overwashed by it, by it happening in Canada, it happening in Australia, and so forth. But what about we, small islands, small little minuscule people in the map of the whole world and this whole agenda, that if we were to devise a plan where we have good marriages, first thing is, the thing is wider than just homosexuality and that thing. We have to have good marriages. We have to look into what is happening to our marriages in Trinidad, how many divorces there are, the sins of infidelity, the things of marriage as a lifetime, the love in relationships, the family building, the happiness of marriage, what it does, and so on. We could look at all that and try to develop that, the common law relationships, all those type of things. We could see how we could drive them into our church, and then have a pastoral plan that deals properly with people of the lesbian community or the gay community in such a way that the world could look at us and say, hey, but wait now, Trinidad is a shining light for us. Probably we could reverse our own agendas here and probably institute what Trinidad could do or what other Caribbean islands could do. And therefore we could be the opposite. I mean, it's a far-fetched thing, but who knows? God could use, small as we are, this mustard seed here, and could blossom into something beautiful for God and for many other countries. So it's not we haven't just kind of throwing up our hands and saying that we have lost the battle, but let's do our best and let's see what happens. And probably we could be a shining light for the whole world, where we could have strong marriages, where people could live happily, where gay people could be sort of appreciated in a way, and we don't have to give in to the laws, or you know, among other things. But it's a wide, you see, we cannot just deal with it piecemeal. We have to deal with it to our own hearts, as Father Matthew says, first, by not discriminating against anybody, for example, whether it be race, color, creed, gay, or whatever it is. But more than that, we lived our Catholic tradition of fidelity, of chastity, of strong marriages, of being obedient to the church, and so on, and see what the fruit that brings, instead of just pointing fingers and seeing that we are self-righteous and pontificated for everybody else. So as far as I see, so that's where my thought is. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments,
Yes.
Father Matthew.
You know, one of the things that he pointed out that's very important is that we need, and that was the topic of the last week's article, we need to begin thinking with the church.
Yeah.
There is I don't want to use a blanket statement, but there's a laziness to learn what the church is teaching by Catholics. They think, oh God, there's so much, until they get an issue like this, and oh God, what does the church say? You know, tell me what the church say, I want to read about it. So that our own formation as Catholics is insufficient, because it's offered, you know, and people don't take the opportunities, you know. You have courses at the center. We have a course in sexual ethics. And sure, the Family Life Commission is looking at doing a kind of town meeting kind of thing about gender and stuff. Common sense parenting.
How many people turn up to those programs?
You know, people just, Trisha must be smiling all now, because she knows, you know, we have things out there, and people do not read, they don't think, they don't reflect. The church has so much. The church stands on faith and reason. And we are lazy as Catholics, you know, it's true. We don't explore it enough. But we have to, if we are able to face what is, you know, we talk about what is coming. But if we are able to understand the paradox, if we are able to hold the gospel, because it's all built upon what is revealed in the gospel, and what is tradition revealing to us. And we can't trap ourselves and say, oh my gosh, everything's falling apart, you know. Because you also have the reality, and I make I'm not saying sorry for saying this. We even have priests who jump on ideological benches. You know, the Pope is warning very carefully against ideologies that being pouted from pulpits. So we have priests who are jumping on ideological benches and leading people to think in one way or another that is pure ideology and not gospel truth.
Amen.
And what it does is therefore make people jump on a bandwagon, and from the time you do that, you're doing what killed Jesus. You're creating a crowd movement.
Pharisaical.
That is not reflective, not thinking, not, you know, and we have people who are doing that.
We've got another call. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi.
Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes,
Yes, we are.
Okay, good evening, Deacon Derek and Miss Leela Ramdeen and Father Ragbir.
Hello.
Good evening. You know, Miss Ramdeen made an excellent point there just now. A while ago, so I don't know if you remember, because there are so many very good points being made tonight. But she was talking about the law as being their morality, and the church have their spirituality. Now, I see it as two very different things. So I don't understand, why are we lumping it sort of together? This is the impression I am getting, that we're lumping because we've agreed with this burglary law that has been passed. Of course, we are appealing it. But why are we just giving in? You know, we have to stand up as church, what we are, what we believe in, what Jesus taught us, and we just have to move and stick to that. We cannot give in to these things. You know, it's just, why are we even thinking about it? Marrying. So, first of all, do they have to get married in our Catholic Church if they decide to get married? Because however they think they can live their life, that is their life and their problem. Now, I don't even think about it. But if somebody is doing something in their bedrooms or in their house, that is their problem. That's their life. We don't have to know. Nobody knows. Nobody interrupts. But when it comes to getting married in the Catholic Church, we stand for one thing that we know. It has to be a man and a woman, and that is what it is, the procreation of children who have to be educated and all of that. So I don't understand, and if you could help me to understand, because I just certainly do not agree with this marrying, and to me it just doesn't relate. They're two separate things. So why are we treating them together?
Thanks.
That's my question.
Thank
you very much.
You know, as you're talking, I'm just reading what His Grace has said here. One of the reasons why we can't only think about who may want to get married in the Catholic Church. We're talking about society as a whole. And he rightly says, Archbishop Jason, that we have to remember that all humans are created to reflect Imago Dei, the image of God. Yeah. Creation has a purpose and a destiny. Nothing we do will distort this image or cause us in fundamental ways to lose this image. We must not lose the fact that Genesis 1:26 and 28 is important for everybody. Yeah? That God made man and woman in His image, after His likeness, for a purpose. Yeah. And that purpose is not only related to Catholics, but to everyone. Sorry, Matthew.
And that it's not about just in male and female, as John Paul points out. It's not just the image of God in their singularity, but it's in the image of God He made them. Male and female He made them. That in their coming together, the image God, the image of relationship, of
male and female, the image God.
Yes. Good. And therefore, in this mutual self-giving, all of that is part of, you know, it's part of, and that's why John Paul called it the primordial sacrament. You know, this hint that opens up the understanding of marriage for us. You know.
And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it." But you cannot multiply if you're the same sex.
No, I want to use a quote from, there's a great, I worked with some books, you know. Well, this is a great book to read. I think, you know, it's something we're going to, this is what has come out in the United States. And Sharif is, you know, he was in Rome, and Ryan Anderson were in Rome when I was there giving a talk at the North American College. But very, very good work they have done on defending marriage. And the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops have brought together a lot of work on that. And I've used some of that in a course I implemented it in a course I was teaching this semester. And then, of course, Buzhevsky, who is a great Catholic philosopher. But one of the things Buzhevsky says in there, he says, how many more colors there are in the world because there are two sexes and not just one. How amusing they are to each other, and yet how baffling. We see all the colors, all right, but admitting to the sight is considered shameful and offensive. Our time today holds it crude to make use of one's eyes. So we make ourselves a little blind. We squint, throw dust in our eyes, and try not to look at things straight on.
Beautiful.
You know?
We just have 1 minute. I want to talk about His Grace's conclusion. He says the job of the Catholic Church is to produce saints, people of radical holiness, people who give themselves to God completely. We are to hold out for humanity the highest values that are human. As such, we do not pander to the trends of the time, but to the eternal laws of God. The human did not make the institution of marriage. We cannot simply change it. Amen. Sanctity comes through an encounter with God's mercy, God's love, and His forgiveness. To be Catholic is to be the face of everyone, especially those opposed to our point of view or way of life. They too are children of God, made in God's image and likeness. Thank you so much for watching Shepherd's Corner. We're on again every Thursday.